We're going to begin. Good afternoon and welcome to our T3 committee, Trade, Travel, and Tourism. Chairman Joe Buscaino, welcome to each and every one of you. Today is Tuesday, September 19th. Mr. Krikorian is down the hall in another committee. He will join us here sometime during the committee meeting. And we have some exciting items before us. And the first item, what we'll do is I'll take these items, and then when Mr. Krikorian comes, since we don't have a quorum, we'd have to reconsider the items. So what I'll take on consent, which will be the communication from the chair, items 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we will hold on the desk items 1, 2, 3 as our discussion items. Before we begin, I know our General Manager, Executive Director of the Port, Gene Soroka, is here. And he's accompanied by the President of the Harbor Commissioner, Ambassador Vilma Martinez. Thank you, Ambassador, for your presence. So with that, let's take item number 1.
Item 1, communications from the Mayor and the City Ethics Commission relative to the appointment of Ms. Lucia Moreno Linares to the Board of Harbor Commissioners for the term ending June 30, 2018 to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Ms. Patricia Castellanos.
Well, this is exciting. This is exciting for our city and our harbor area communities. Welcome, Ms. Moreno. Linares, Cecilia. I'm sorry, Lucia. Cecilia is your sister. Just for the record, the Moreno family is. This is a shining moment for not only for the Moreno family but also for the Wilmington community. I'm excited to hear why you want to take on this commission position. I do want to recognize Mayor Garcetti for empowering you to fill this position. I have known you for many years as a senior lead officer at the harbor area. You have been on the ground, been a fighter, a champion for the Wilmington community. At the same time advocating for resources and oftentimes challenging the port, which is good, which is exactly what we need in a commissioner specifically for the Wilmington community. We have not had a Wilmington resident on the Board of Harbor Commissioners in a long time. So I'm happy that the mayor has recognized this with this recommendation. And so, Lucia, don't call me Cecilia. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your experience, and why you want to take on this opportunity to serve on the Harbor Commission.
So thank you, Joe. And it's your committee, so I would not think to correct you today, but anytime after today, you bet.
Right.
It's such a short name, so people will remember it. I'm honored, for the opportunity. I asked, are you sure? When they called me and said if I was willing to serve. I consider it a great responsibility, foremost, then an opportunity. And I don't need to be honored, but I feel honored for being asked. I've lived in Wilmington all my life, or at least since we came here. I was born in Mexico. I don't want to leave Wilmington. The home I live in, we built, my husband and I, before we got married, together with 19 other people. Wow. We did not want to leave out of Wilmington, but we wanted to be homeowners, and there was not any new housing being built. And so we started a project, kind of like Habitat for Humanity, but without all the resources. And a piece of vacant land became available next to Holy Family Church. It used to be a lumberyard, the Brits Lumberyard, 2 sides of the street, huge property. And then when the owner passed away, the children did not want to keep the business open. And we just knew that land was going to go up and a huge apartment building was going to go up. I was 23 at the time, and we had already been not protesting, but certainly advocating that the apartment building needed to be controlled, that many individual homes were being knocked out, and there was no plan was really being followed. And the plan for that area had not been reviewed in many years. So long story short, we bid on that property. It was awarded to us. Then we spent a year trying to find a bank to finance a loan to build because nobody was a builder, nobody was a contractor. We were just residents that wanted to live in Wilmington, and nobody wants to build new home in Wilmington. That was what we were told, about 32 years ago. And our project, our homeowner association, is called Casa Milagro because there are so many developments that go belly up, right, that fail from people that know what they're doing. So the fact that we finished our project, once we actually started construction, we were done in 9 months. Everybody helped build it. My dad poured the foundation for a lot of those homes. Wow. So to me, you live in Wilmington or in any community you live in, you want to make it better. Not because you're altruistic or, because you live there. It's where I live, just like wherever you live, you care what happens. That's been the case, all my life. So just that's the way we build our homes. My work has been for 34 years. I worked at a credit union. If you're familiar with credit unions, you own them. They exist for the service of those that are members. In my case, the focus has been the low income, the immigrant, the low wealth people, and financial literacy, helping people make the most of the little bit that they have to learn to stretch a dollar. And so I've spent years doing small group workshops on budgeting, on how to buy a car, how to buy insurance, how to find a realtor, how to finance, how to buy car insurance and find out what the discounts are, just trying to help people stretch the dollar that they have. Because it doesn't matter if you have a lot or a little. If you don't know how to use it, you'll still be short. You'll still be in the red, right? I mean, you see it in the budgets for the city or anywhere else. So, but if you are low wealth, low income, it's even harder. And so that has been my mission, to help people with that. I've been fortunate, that I have been able to work at a place like that in Wilmington. So my cars always have very little mileage because, from my home to where I go to church to where I work, it's revolves around there. Right. I became involved with the neighborhood council for the same reason. When the charter reform happened and it was time to start a neighborhood council, that ours was the first one. We're the first one created. But we spent almost a year and a half before that meeting. I was part of that core group of people together with all the leaders in Wilmington, whether it was from schools, from nonprofits, from church, from business. And we met all over what is Wilmington, at the schools. And the conversation was, are we going to have 3 neighborhood councils? Are we going to have 1? And everybody had to compromise a little so that we could agree that we were going to have one voice. And that's what we did back when you started. And I served on that for a good 6 years. And I was never chair of it because I didn't want to be chair. But I was the secretary, and I took all the notes. Because, that's the part's important, what you agreed to do, what you disagree to do. That's the record. But we were fortunate because when I was serving, I had the presidents. I worked along very well with them. So for me, consensus, getting along, is important. I have no problem following. I don't have to be in charge of things, but I do like to follow people who know what they're doing, who can explain it clearly. You can see where we're headed. And I guess that's one of the reasons also that I feel so fortunate. I look at the leadership that we have currently on the Harbor Commission, and so it's like, I can work there. You don't have to come in knowing everything. You've got people that do know what they're doing and can explain it and follow it. So that's important to me. Family is important to me. I come from a large family. I have 6 sisters. 4 of them are school teachers. So again, I always say that I'm not a teacher, except that I am teaching in finance, but the rest of my sisters are regular school teachers, LA Unified, Long Beach Unified. Again, staying in the area. Everything that happens in the Harbor area is important to us. We know what struggle is. My dad was a construction laborer. We know what having to earn everything you have. My parents didn't become homeowners. My dad was in his 50s when he was first able to buy a home. And only because in this, the home that we rented in was sold and they had to move us, and there were 7 kids.
Wow.
And nobody was going to rent to someone with 7 kids.
Wow.
And the realtor helped us find a home that they had vacant, and he helped us buy that home. We have been helped by more than one person, has been generous with us. My parents are hardworking, my mom, a homemaker. There are many children in Wilmington whom my mom babysat, and shared with them what she shared with us. So education was always important. Homework came first. My mom doesn't speak English, and so she could not read the homework that we had, but she would look at it, and it's like, oh, that looks messy, do it again. She could tell that part. This doesn't look quality. She didn't understand content. She never missed a parent meeting, and we always translated because my mom didn't speak English and the teachers didn't speak Spanish.
Right.
But she, all the way through high school, and that's just not elementary, junior high, high school, because she took her responsibility seriously. And my dad used to say, if each of us took care of our own children, we wouldn't need so many services, but there are too many of us that don't take that responsibility seriously. So support for families is important, because nowadays, I think what my parents did, where we lived off of only one income, is very difficult now for people. And so there are both parents out of the home. Where did those children go? And so I've become involved with the Y or with other organizations that affect the quality of life. You have to tell me when you need me to stop talking, because otherwise I'll just keep on going.
No.
So,
You have, obviously, the resident credentials of serving on this board. And, again, it's unmatched. And it's evident in the events that I go to and, the events that you and your family support. Even more recently, Fleet Week at the Banning Mansion, where you and your sisters had spent the entire day setting up for the servicemen and women during that reception, and without asking for anything, because this is the love you have, you and your family, for Wilmington does not go unnoticed, clearly. It's great that you have the experience of the credit union. I'm sure you're going to be questioning the port's credit rating, and will complement the board very well. So tell me some of your priorities, your first term. In your first term, that would you say would be top priorities in serving as a new harbor commissioner?
I guess because the port is such a big neighbor, next to Wilmington, and because I live in Wilmington, the effects that it has are very important, or always, right up front. So are we a good neighbor? And I kind of start with how we look. Do we look like a good neighbor? Do we maintain our property? I'd want to know of the properties that are port-owned in Wilmington, in San Pedro Harbor Gateway.
Yep.
One day I'm just going to get in the car and I just want to go drive by. What do they look like? Do we help the area that we're in? Does the port, in the areas that we're located, do we look like a good neighbor? Do people wonder who owns this piece of land? Is it full of weeds, whatever? Just because when I drive by, I want it to look good, or at least to look clean, certainly to look safe. There's projects going on, like the waterfront park, that just got finished, but then we have the rest of the section in Wilmington, certainly in San Pedro, with the whole rebuild that's going on there. I think those projects are important because they affect the perception that the rest of the community has of the port, what we're doing. So seeing those projects get finished is important. When you live next to the port, we appreciate the value, right? The economic engine that the port is, not just for our little city and our jobs, but for the rest of the city, for the big city, for the state, for the whole country. We're all affected by that. I think the rest of the country benefits, goods coming in, cars, food, everything comes in, right? Yep. And so that's good. In order to get all of that to the rest of the country, you go through Wilmington, kind of thing. You go through San Pedro Harbor Gateway. what's the path that we leave behind, right? And so whether it's clean trucks or the repairs that happen to the streets, that we're a good neighbor is important to me, that we take care, that we mitigate where we create things that are not good, that are not welcome. And in the mitigation choices that we make, did we make those choices with consensus from the community, with input from the community? Because those are the people that are affected. So
another reason why I want to commend the mayor, when he was first elected, he made it clear that he wants 3 harbor area residents to serve on this commission, because you, like many, and your other 2 colleagues, Mr. Perosi and Mr. Arian, you live it, you feel it, you see it, and you also understand the benefits, the economic benefits, but also you're holding the port accountable at the same time with the impacts of such a huge port complex. Commercial development along the waterfront, as you know, the mayor and I have been really supportive of moving on a long-term community reinvestment plan. I want to commend the port and the commission for committing those dollars over the course of the next several years. Give me your thoughts on what's taking place on the Wilmington waterfront, the San Pedro waterfront. Do you support commercial development along the waterfront?
I do. I think that because we're a neighbor there, because the port is a neighbor there, what we do to support commercial development, and even further in from the waterfront, I think that part's important. I think everything has to be done with the big picture and a big plan in mind. However, I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I don't know if the biggest thing is for me to have a bunch of tourists coming to Wilmington. As much as that would be nice, I think a lot of the people that live in Wilmington would appreciate that, but they would appreciate more having good jobs. And so when we look at the plan of what we're going to develop, taking into account the business of the port, I think that part comes first, and growing that business in a way that supports developing, around the communities. It's a benefit, to the communities. Right. I think right now, myself coming in, I probably don't know enough of what that whole plan looks like. I know what we've suggested, say for Wilmington, what's been proposed for in the San Pedro side, but I'm not familiar enough with the whole big picture that the port has in order to, comment enough to say. But I do believe that if the port is doing well enough, can it do more to help? Yep. Along the edge. Yeah.
That's a ticket. I look at the president of the commission, Ambassador Martinez, who led that effort, and you like Gene, Ambassador, say when the port's successful, the community's successful, and that's the progress that we're making. Happy to see the Wilmington waterfront design finalizing here as well, and looking at the mouth of Avalon and working with ULI and with the TAP study, and you've been actively engaged in that process on the design of the Wilmington waterfront, right?
Right.
Fantastic. Now, you've also served as a harbor area planning commissioner. Tell us about how that prepared yourself for this new position as a commissioner, as far as introducing the city family and the bureaucracy that's involved in sitting on this as a former harbor area planning commissioner.
I think so. I was part of that first group of area planning commissioners after the city charter was amended, improved, and those planning commissions were created. It was interesting because it was all, we were learning along the way. It's not like if you get appointed now, they've got a whole process in place. I appreciated the opportunity to meet with the people from the rest of the city, the other planning commissions. That was interesting. For us, some of the projects that came on board. I think my biggest, what I brought to the table is that because of the experience we'd had with the homes that we built, and we had to go through all of that,
Right.
I don't want to say red tape, but through the whole process
Well,
of,
it's red
of
tape.
permits and changes, and then we went from being single-family homes, oh, no, okay, that's not going to work. We can use the land better, because in times where for example, in our city, where we don't have enough affordable housing, and we have to rethink the old dream that we all had of these lots side by side, and it doesn't work anymore, right? The land is too prime, and we are building up, kind of thing. We went through that for ourselves, for our project, and then so okay, no, they're going to be PUDs instead because we can use the land better. We can that kind of thing. All of that, I think, helped me on the planning commission because when they were talking about, there was a public hearing and what was being recommended and what is a variance and why we're changing, I was not lost. I'll probably be more lost on this commission than I was on that one just because I was a little bit familiar. It was very fresh to me.
Right.
I appreciated the opportunity to give input on a project that was, affecting our area.
Right.
I appreciate it because I attended a few of those hearings. Even we were not required to be there. Someone from staff would be doing it. But just listening to being able to listen to the concerns that a constituent had on, not giving a particular liquor license somewhere else. And I appreciate the process that our city had in place to be heard, as long as you know that process.
Right.
Unfortunately, too many people don't know the process and things just, pass them by. But I came away with a better understanding of our city, and the code that is so big.
Right.
We ended up with all these binders,
Got it. Well, this is America's largest port.
So
I think that's prepared you well for it, and working in conjunction with the planning team at the port as we redevelop the water line. The Wilmington community, if you look at the impacts of the port, it's important. You've heard the mayor, in partnership with our partners in the Long Beach side, of calling for a zero-emission port by 2035. And at the same time, how do you balance the needs of remaining competitive and at the same time maintaining a market share, but also doing everything we can to lower emissions? And the port has done amazing work in moving toward reducing emissions clearly. But how do you balance that out as a Wilmington resident, which has been identified as an impacted, disadvantaged community? Sitting on the AQMD board, I see that it's a red zone. But how do you balance that out?
Well, I guess the key word is balance. Because I live in Wilmington, so clean air is important to me. But jobs are important too. What kind of help do we give people who are driving the trucks that are doing the pollution, for example, or the polluting? I think there is no easy solution. There may be a mandate that says, zero emissions by a certain year. I think that having that goal or having that mandate, this is what we're getting, that part's important. The detail of getting it, I think it's going to be steps. I don't think that it's anything that happens overnight. I think that when we look, does this technology exist? And then once the technology gets created, and we've got creative people. They're gonna make it. It's gonna exist.
Today, right?
What's it gonna cost? And so who is going to be able to afford it? And in our community, we're not just disadvantaged in that we have bad air. We're also disadvantaged in that many of the workers that we have are the ones driving the old trucks, and not the new ones. We at the port, regularly at commission meetings, they're coming in trying to get organized, and you hear the plight that they have, and so there's a lot of work to be done. I guess influencing those that are going to make those decisions. I don't know enough to say what those steps are going to be, except that I do understand it is a balance. that we clean it and that there's people still around to enjoy that clean air. That we don't clean it because we destroyed the jobs, kind of thing. That plan needs input from a lot of people. Yeah.
Appreciate that. We have speaker cards here, but let me say this. I think the best experience one can have in serving on this commission is being a community advocate. And you've been that champion on the ground. And I've seen it personally for many, many years. And I love the fact that you're not afraid to hold people accountable, including your senior lead officer, including your council member, including port staff. And this is the advocacy that we need on the Harbor Commission. In a time where we have the best and brightest port director in this country, you'll be sitting alongside just incredible leaders in our community who too care about, they value the port and the operation of the port, but also value at the same time the needs of the community. So I'm excited about this appointment. I know you and I and the mayor had an opportunity to sit down in my office and just discuss different the future of the port and where it stands and how it's going to benefit our city and our region. So with that, I'll ask you now to move on over to the next chair, and I have, which I assume will be a love fest here in a minute, a number of, we have about 4 cards. So I'll first call up Dan Hoffman to come speak. I'm sorry, before Dan, Ambassador, did you want to say a few words? Yes, I'm sorry, Dan. Let's bring, just if I can, point of personal privilege and have the ambassador say a few words first.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. We on the commission are very excited to have a new member joining us. We're going to miss Patricia Castellanos, but we're really excited about Lucia. As you know, because you have been so very much involved in the Wilmington plans, you have attended personally the meetings that we had in the evenings at Wilmington. So it's just great to have your interests coupled with a community person from there to help us, the commission and the port under Jean's leadership, to do as much as we can as quickly as we can. Right. I know that I have not been known for great patience in my life, but I suspect you haven't either.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
No. So we are just very excited about it. We thank you for your continued support, Councilman, and we're looking forward to working with her.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Okay, with that, let's bring up Dan Hoffman, and will be followed by Cecilia Moreno. Dan?
Council member, thank you for this opportunity. And you're right, I think it probably is going to be a love fest. Lucia.
Oh, you do the same thing. You almost call it.
Lucia kind of, she actually kind of soft sells herself because she mentioned the credit union and why she's involved, which is about her heart. But what she doesn't tell you is her business acumen. So that started as Holy Family Credit Union. And it needed to move from there. And they had to take a leap of faith that they could, make it work. Although they're a nonprofit, you have to bring in revenue to pay your employees. And to keep things going, you've got to make loans. And so that's where we got Family Federal Credit Union. And then now it's self-help. So it went basically from probably a $5 million operation to a $10 million operation. And as self-help, they're now part of a $1 billion operation. And so she has that business acumen that I think you want to.
Sure.
You mentioned love of community, and I can't, is that my time?
Yeah, let's wrap it up quickly.
Mentioned love of community, and there's no one who's bought more doing graffiti and YMCA and so much more.
Right.
But
thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Cecilia.
Hello.
Do you know this lady?
I
to your
happen
right?
to know. I do.
Okay.
I do. Cecilia Moreno, 1234 Lacme Avenue. So just, I wanted to come on record on, and by the way, I am not working today. I'm on vacation officially. I work for the Harbor Department, but I'm not working today. So I wanted to come on record, one, to thank the mayor for this opportunity. I think you couldn't have chosen a better person to sit on that commission. she's ready to get to work, without a doubt. As a family member, we're really excited and at the same time very nervous because it's a lot of responsibility. We're breast cancer survivors, and part of that is the stress that you're under. So I know it worried me, but I think in the long run, that's what Lucia is about. She's a fighter. We all are. And so I'm really excited that she's going to be my boss, which is very cool. But I think you couldn't have chosen a better person, so I trust that the committee will move this forward. I also, on behalf of our Rotary Club, the Wilmington Rotary Club, we had a meeting on Monday, and overwhelmingly, I was asked, make sure you put on record that the club in Wilmington is just behind this candidate. So thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. Thomas Jelinek, and then followed by Erica Velasquez. Thomas?
Councilman.
Thanks for
Good
joining us.
afternoon. Thank you. Thomas Jelinich, PMSA. I just want to extend our welcome to, I'm almost going to do it too, Lucia Moreno Linares. And we're really looking forward to working with you on maritime issues. And I'm personally very excited to have another local resident on the commission. That is a fantastic thing. We need more locals in all of the maritime industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And our final speaker would be Erica Velasquez. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Member. I am honored to be here this afternoon on behalf of Supervisor Janice Hahn, and I actually have a statement to read on her behalf. I would like to voice my support for appointing Lucia Moreno Linares to the Board of Harbor Commissioners. Should Lucia be appointed, she would be the first Wilmington resident to serve on the board since Gertrude Schwab, who was appointed by 1993 by Mayor Reardon. And I believe she was removed after 1 year because of her outspokenness. It is a shame that it has been so long because the Wilmington community is a vital and important voice for the commission to hear. When I sat on the City Charter Commission in the late 1990s, I made sure that the Harbor Commission must include at least one resident from the neighboring communities of San Pedro and Wilmington. The intention was to have someone on the commission who lived in the local community and understood the impact of the port on the neighborhood surrounding the harbor. Wilmington residents breathe pollution from our ports and deal with port traffic on a daily basis. Lucia Moreno Linares knows these issues personally and has also witnessed the important role that port plays in supporting our local economy. She would be an excellent addition to the Harbor Commission and a dedicated and thoughtful representative of the local port communities. I thank you, Chair Buscain, and the members of the Trade, Travel, and Tourism Committee for your consideration of this candidate. She would make an excellent Harbor Commissioner.
Thank you so much. You want to, we can include that in the record if you like. Give that to the city clerk. Thank you, Erica. And thank you to Supervisor Hahn for her statement. Okay, you still want to do this? So with that, because we don't have a quorum yet, it'll be with the communication of the chair to approve the recommendation for Mayor Garcetti to name Lucia Moreno Linares to the Harbor Board of Harbor Commissioners. And that'll be the order. Okay, and we'll see you in council tomorrow. Okay, so for those who spoke on this item, once we have a quorum, we will have to reconsider item 1, and you will also be afforded another opportunity to speak if you choose once we have the quorum, so that our goal is to have public comment satisfied with a quorum. But Mr. Krikorian, I know, is down the hall in another committee, and once he arrives, we can reconsider item 1. Okay, so with that, let us now take, I know we have Mr. Soroka here on an exciting item on looking at efficiencies and using technology. If we can now take item number 3 and read that into the record, please.
Item 3, communication from the Board of Harbor Commissioners and CA report relative to Port Resolution Number 178153, Revenue Allocation Agreement 173518 with General Electric Company, addressing the partnership arrangement for the data portal project, and a general and categorical exemption from the requirements of CEQA.
Thank you, Mr. White. So, Mr. Rocco, this is forward-thinking, exciting news. I've been following the developments, and thank you for your briefings, you and your team, on this item before us to finally come to this and bringing this data portal to the Port of Los Angeles. I want to recognize you for your leadership in making this happen, along with GE and our partners. So with that, the floor is yours on presenting item number 3 before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. Following the Harbor Commission meeting on August 10th, which unanimously approved our project with General Electric Transportation, bringing before the committee today and tomorrow at full council, we are asking that you concur with the Board of Harbor Commissioners approval of the revenue allocation agreement with General Electric Company that includes the following: revenue sharing term of 5 years and an exclusive subscription period for 10 years to follow, along with shared promotional activities and marketing commitments. I'll take you through where we came from, what we're doing now, and how we aspire to move forward in the future. Shortly after I came on as Executive Director at the Port of Los Angeles in June of 2014, we began to witness epic levels of port congestion, not only here in Southern California, but at most east-west major trade hubs and ports. A summation of larger vessels, new partnerships and acquisitions, dislocations throughout the supply chain, divestiture of assets, and here in our backyard, a protracted longshore employer labor agreement negotiation. With that, we saw cargo get stuck, product not make it to the store shelves, agricultural items not make it out of our country for export, perishables did go to waste, and we needed to find a better way to manage our business. Being at the confluence of all these events in the supply chain, as well as having deep relationships throughout our stakeholder groups, we took it upon ourselves to begin that discussion. And as we saw from our early talks, that our supply chain data points existed throughout the universe, from shipper to transportation company, truck organization, railroads, and many others, including the beneficial cargo owners. Yet much of this data was very siloed, and more importantly, it wasn't shared among stakeholders in a way that we thought it could be. So beginning right here in Southern California, under the direction of the Federal Maritime Commission, we began to bring stakeholders together for supply chain optimization meetings. Since then, which was February of 2015, when the FMC gave us the directive, we began a series of more than 100 stakeholder meetings, including more than 200 individual stakeholder groups, companies, bureaus, municipalities, and other agencies. What we found from there is there was one easy idea that we could get together, and that was simply creating these relationships that would be solutions driven. And with that, many of our discussions revolved around data and how we could better share data among partners and create new relationships where those data avenues would become much clearer than they were today. And that brought us together with General Electric. After we went out for public bid, looking for ideas under an RFP requirement to develop a systematic approach to sharing data, we found General Electric Transportation. And these folks, who are a known commodity at the federal, state, county, and municipal level throughout the United States and abroad, were ones that had a vision that could take our aspiration to market and in reality. We began with making sure the data was secure, and not only from federal standards and other international standards, but also with what the users of the system would want, and that would be to hold back on all proprietary information. So as an example, we did not want to divulge what was inside a container, how much it was worth, at what store it would be sold, what ad would be connected, or what value on the price tag would be shown at our stores down line. And with GE's credibility, we were able to fashion a system of firewalling this information and holding it within the federal agencies, which led us to the next step, and that was creating a relationship with the Department of Homeland Security and United States Customs Border Patrol. These folks created a system called the Automated Manifest System, which allows for clearance on vessels departing Asia 1 day or 24 hours before the ship sails towards Los Angeles. That data seems to be the most coherent available in our system of systems, and by utilizing it along with the firewall, we're able now to see data some 14 days before a vessel comes to LA. As an example today, normal practice is that initial passage of data, which is very much grayscaled, not specific to what's on a vessel, usually is available 2 days before the vessel comes to LA. So we're widening that line of sight to nearly 2 weeks, depending on origin, and giving the ability to the users of the system to share that information across. So whether it be a cargo owner sharing it with their truck firm, their railroad, their chassis provider, folks now have the ability to look at this much earlier. In addition, through the architecture of this system that GE has designed, we have channeled access, which simply means retailer A cannot see their competitors' information and vice versa, and same with the service providers. The different users will have access, whether they're a shipping line, a terminal operator, the aforementioned cargo owners, or many others in the supply chain. And they'll have a specific view which is tailored to their needs and the design by those folks who want to see exactly what is coming at them. An example of the truck community was that typically they don't have this information until after cargo is simply ready to be picked up. And the individual truck drivers will wait in long queues before picking up their containers at our port. In addition, much of their office and administrative time is spent going through 13 to 15 websites, looking at nearly 20 emails on a daily basis to understand what cargo activity would be. And what General Electric has done is aggregated all this data and put it in a single pane of glass. So our truck partners save on average 2 hours per day per person of those office staff who are there to simply look and understand how the port is operating. That in itself we see as a key step forward in helping modernize the supply chain. We then commenced a pilot, and it was an idea of simply running this GE system in its newest form at our largest terminal, AP Moller, along with the two largest liner shipping companies in the world, Maersk from Copenhagen and Mediterranean Shipping Company from Geneva. The test was to be statistically significant, and from our economists, big port, a lot of containers, we wanted to make sure we learned enough to be able to go further. And so utilizing those big shipping lines and our big terminal operator, we got enough data to understand that there would be some relevance to our ideas. The results of our survey, both private and public, one-on-one and in groups, was that the system was very, very necessary to ongoing operations. The data provided was relevant to enhancing efficiencies, and the usability or capability of sharing this information was readily available to participants. We also chose a series of truckers here in Southern California, the two Western railroads, our short-haul railroad, PHL, and a series of cargo owners, major retailers, all the way down to folks who run family businesses. So with that progression during the course of the trial, we then went to our Harbor Commission on August 10th and asked to expand this project throughout the rest of the Port of Los Angeles and to the remaining terminals as well as shipping lines in our Trans-Pacific Theater. Receiving that approval, we began embarking on further discussions with the other supply chain stakeholders to join us for a port-wide contribution of this information sharing system. Going down line, we envision this rollout to take place over the next several months. More functionality will be added to this system, such as potentially a universal appointment system for truckers, so they will have confidence and transparency as to when they can pick up and drop off containers, have available chassis, and to the Western Railroad surety that they can reposition their rail cars, engine power, and crew to haul the amount of cargo in and out of the port that is representative of real-time information. Today, the railroads typically get estimations which are not necessarily as clear as they would like them. And then moving into 2019, we see a real refinement of this process and something that we've worked on wide and far. Not only was this born as a local idea, but we were also participants in no less than 4 federal committees on supply chain management, ports work, and transportation through the Departments of Commerce and Transportation, as well as the Federal Maritime Commission. That allowed us the opportunity to remove our local hats, bring additional stakeholders together for user discovery sessions and focus groups to see if this idea really would gain traction, but more importantly, learn from what experts had to say. This is not a self-designed system. It is built by the users and something that we will continue to carry out into the future. Again, our request of you is to concur with the Board of Harbor Commissioners for the approval of the revenue allocation agreement with General Electric Company that includes revenue sharing of 5 years and an exclusive subscription of 10 years to follow. This will also be with shared promotional activities and marketing commitments. And what this means, Mr. Chair, is that not only are we operationalizing an industry-first information sharing portal, no one in the world has done this before, But we have also created a partnership with General Electric that will share any potential revenue from this newly designed system with the Port of Los Angeles. It also gives us the opportunity, should this system be adopted in other ports around the country or overseas, to share in revenue there as well. And going down line in what amounts to an additional 10-year partnership, we will have the exclusive licensing rights here in Southern California for 10 years to follow this 5-year mark.
So walk me through that, if you can, Mr. Soroka, on the licensing agreement. So say if our neighbors, the Port of Long Beach wants to tap into this system, or say the Port of Oakland or other ports around the country, it would, if you look at the revenue sharing, so just walk me through, if they make a buck, we get a certain percentage of that dollar based on this technology.
I'll give you several sequences, Mr. Chair. The revenue sharing agreement for Los Angeles is very succinct, that we will share the revenue with General Electric 50-50 between the Port of LA and the company. We have asked and are hopeful that the Port of Long Beach will join us right away. And we think that a bay-wide approach in San Pedro Bay is appropriate because many of our customers and supply chain service providers use both ports in equal fashion. So we're working with newly appointed General Manager Mario Cordero, his new President of the Harbor Commission, Luann Bynum, and others to bring this program together. Going outside of Los Angeles, we'll have an opportunity to share in a license residual agreement that would bring additional money into the Harbor Department should this work in other port locations nationwide or around the world. The 10-year agreement is one that gives us exclusive rights to this product and its next generation products with General Electric for a period of 10 years with revenue sharing attached as well.
Before I move on, I do want to welcome Mr. Krikorian to committee, and thank you for joining us. I know you're bouncing around down the hall. I don't know who's scheduled.
Here directly, sir, so thank you.
I know these are going to be challenging committees between the two. Was it ER&R?
Yes.
ER, it is. Okay. Appreciate your presence. So cost recovery, if you look at, benefiting from the licensing agreements, what's this cost today, and can we anticipate us paying for this program or this data portal through the licensing agreement?
The initial outlay on behalf of the Harbor Department, Mr. Chair and Mr. Councilman, is going to be approximately $13 million to get the system up and running. The cost of developing this system, which is based on a $1 billion cloud-based operating system that GE owns and operates called Predix. GE will put in additional money many times greater than the money the Harbor Department is investing. I am not at permission to divulge that money for competitive cost reasons with respect to GE and their internal policy. It is my view, and I've gone on public record to state that I think from the pilot, we will see between 8 and 12% efficiency gains when implementing this system harbor-wide. To put it in basic terms, as far as an ROI, if we can increase the port's efficiencies between 1 and 2% per year, that pays for the system. But what we want to do is continue to grow the port's container volume, its business, and its jobs while being a strong environmental steward. And there'll be a little bit more from Chris Cannon of the Harbor Department on how important efficiencies are to emissions reductions, and that have been proven already at the Port of Los Angeles. We also see that there is going to be an opportunity with respect to enhanced efficiencies to withdraw cost from the system for our supply chain stakeholders. And in a time where the industry has gone through much reported financial travails, this will be a welcome addition to all the work that our community has been doing.
Appreciate that. And I do want to recognize also Port Police Chief Tom Gazy, who's here. And I know you're on the ground. You and your men and women want to recognize Port PD, premier law enforcement maritime agency in the country. You mentioned briefly, Gene, on the cybersecurity firewall. That was one concern that I had.
Yes.
Of others potentially tapping into the system. Again, for the record, we have Mr. Krikorian here. The partnership between Homeland Security and the federal government. Any concerns there?
No, it all started with a conversation with the previous Deputy Secretary, Ali Mayorkas, who is a friend of ours here in Southern California. The idea was that the Department of Homeland Security and the Customs Border Patrol have this information through what they call the automated manifest system. GE, being a recognized tech advisor and consultant contractor to the federal, state, local, and municipal governments, has a strong reputation in cybersecurity. We were able to reach protocols where we maintain GE's system as a firewall to keep all proprietary information inside the agency at DHS. That, along with other federal and international protocols on cybersecurity and security in general, as noted on that one slide, have been of great importance since inception.
Mr. Corey, I know you just joined us. This is, forward-thinking, using technology on the goods movement. Typically, we know 2 days in advance prior to the ship docking here, a 14-day period, so we know what's coming in. If you look at, I also see this as a benefit to our environment. This is going to be a lot less idling of trucks, of trains. We know what's coming well in advance, so they can plan for the movement of goods in and out of our port complex. So with that, I know, Mr. Soroka, you do have a video you want to share, a 2-minute piece?
Sure. Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Schoffer with GE Transportation. Thank you for asking me to join you today. I wish I could be there in person. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the pilot that we did with the Port of Los Angeles. The pilot itself kicked off in November of last year, and the scope of the pilot was 2 vessel operators, 1 terminal operator, 10 BCOs, and 3 chassis providers. The goal of the pilot itself was to prove that the tool, since it's a first of its kind, would be useful and valuable to the end users, but also to collect user feedback in order for us to improve it as we move forward. Overall, the results of the pilot were overwhelmingly positive. Over 90% of our users thought that the portal itself both was attractive and easy to use and added value to their daily operations. A few examples of that. Today, chassis providers have to look at multiple screens to see the information they need to do proper equipment planning, to know the number of chassis they need of certain sizes. Another example, a trucker has to log into multiple websites in order to know where to drop an empty container, who's accepting those empties. Today, they can do it now with our solution in one single place. That's going to lead to productivity improvements across the port, and we're really excited to partner with you all on this journey. As we look forward towards the rest of this year and into next, it's our goal to onboard the rest of the Port of Los Angeles data. That's really where our focus will be through the end of the year. As we get into next year, we'll focus on also building out new features, and we collected that feedback through our user survey coming off of our pilot. And then finally, by 2019, it's our goal to have the Port of Los Angeles fully operational on the portal. In closing, GE Transportation has greatly enjoyed the partnership with the Port of Los Angeles to build this information portal. We look forward to the future and working together with both the port and City of LA. Thank you.
Fantastic. And just one final comment, if I may, Mr. Chair and Councilman, that in comparison to building out further infrastructure that may or may not be possible to achieve the results that we aspire through this information sharing system, millicents on the dollar. So using a relatively small investment on behalf of the public, on behalf of the Harbor Department to help drive efficiencies and fluidity, we think will pay huge dividends at a relatively smart way of spending our money.
I read earlier that this is already an award-winning technology advancement.
Yeah, and we're barely off the ground yet, but
Yeah.
folks who observe our industry, including our city IT folks, who we've worked very closely with, have recognized us already. I think more good news to come.
Right. Mr. Gregori?
Well, you had me at ROI. Then you throw in their emissions reduction too, and I mean, it's a win-win-win for sure.
Great. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Soroka. So with that, without objection, we'll approve item 3 and move that to council tomorrow. Thank you. So now we have a quorum. If we can reconsider on consent, Mr. Krikorian, unless you want to hold any of these items 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
No objection to
Fantastic.
moving forward, sir.
And also item number 1, which with the approval of Commissioner-elect Lucia Moreno Linares to the Board of Harbor Commissioners. And while you're here, and now that we have quorum, I'd like to offer those who spoke, who filled out a card, if you would like to come forward again to speak, you have that opportunity. Otherwise, it was a love fest, by the way. You didn't miss.
Certain that
It
it was.
was the Wilmington community that was here. Sister Cecilia, who is a proud sister of the Moreno family, represented well. So we'll approve then item number 1 and send that forward to council tomorrow as well for the full council approval of the commission appointment of Lucia Moreno. So congratulations and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Okay, so that we worked that. We have our final item number 2. I'd like to bring forward Chris Cannon to speak on this item. If you can read that item into the record.
Item 2, Director of Environmental Management, Harbor Department, to present verbal report relative to the current and future commercial availability of zero and near zero emission trucks and equipment for use at the Port of Los Angeles.
Great. And just note, we do have one speaker card, Thomas Jelinek, and we'll call you forward after the presentation. Mr. Cannon, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, council members, for inviting us here. Chris Cannon, along with my boss, Gene Soroka. I'm going to just do a quick presentation. We gave a presentation to the board. They asked us to talk a little bit about what is, we hear about zero emissions equipment and near zero emissions equipment, and people come to us and say they're ready, they're available. How come we don't just do it right away? And so Gene asked us to do a little presentation and talk about what does that really mean? So we did, and then I also have some information on our emissions inventory, in particular related to the efficiency issues that we talked about a moment ago. So starting out, the first question about zero and near zero emissions equipment to ask is, what exactly do people mean when they say stuff is commercially available? Regulatory agencies, businesses, NGOs, a lot of the people, the commentators, say something's available. What does it mean? Well, there's a lot of definitions. There are a lot of defining factors, including how much is sold and whether anything has been promoted and so forth. But if you get to the end of the day, we use the CARB definition, and it really means that if someone's willing to sell you something and you're willing to buy it, then it's commercially available. And so it's just really that simple. The problem, however, is just because it's commercially available doesn't mean that it's suitable for you. And so the real question, we use the term viability. You could also just talk about suitability. The real question is, okay, so someone's willing to sell it. Is it appropriate at this point to buy it? And the questions to be asked are the duty cycle performance. Can it handle the duty cycle? The port duty cycle is usually heavier than a warehouse. And some of the zero emissions equipment actually works at warehouses today, but yet when you bring it to the port, it's a little more strained. It has to move heavier cargo, and so they're still working on it. Cost, it has to fit into a business model. Post-purchase support, these are things that people don't think about, but actually are important to operators of terminals. Things like warranties, maintenance, service, and availability of parts. Reasonable repair time, and if you have to repair something, is there a loaner vehicle available, or do you have to buy extra equipment to make up for when you're having this zero emissions or near zero emissions equipment in the shop? These are all things that have to be proven over time and operating this equipment. So the regulatory agencies actually recognize this, and we've reported to the Board of Harbor Commissioners and others about the grants that we get, because they're often asking us to test, to evaluate performance. And the idea is based on this viability question. So the next issue is there universal agreement on the definition of zero and near zero emissions? A couple things to note to you today. First of all, technically there is no such thing as zero emissions. When you hear people say zero emissions, it's actually just a term of art. Truly, there is no such thing as zero emissions, because always there are some emissions somewhere associated with the operation.
Including the tires, right?
Well, and not just that, but the generation of electricity. When you generate electricity somewhere in a power plant, there are emissions associated with that. So, for instance, I used some of the examples here. Battery electric, there aren't any tailpipe emissions, but the power plants have emissions. If you have a fuel cell, the creation of the fuel, or if you have to plug it in again, power plants. And then we get this story about renewable natural gas. We have the natural gas group, and they come and talk to us a lot, and they say, wow, it's the same as zero emissions or better. Well, it's not quite true. If we're talking about greenhouse gas, yes, they do indeed have a benefit because they don't have the creation of the gas emissions that are normally associated with creation of, mining of natural gas. But renewable natural gas engines have emissions coming out of the tailpipe. It's just not diesel emissions. And so when they say it's the same as zero, that should be qualified. Finally, we go back to the Air Resources Board again, and we ask them, what do they think that near zero emissions are? They are still trying to decide what near zero emissions are. We have, ultimately, they're referring to low NOx engines. The NOx ratings for 2010 compliant engines, which are the cleanest engines that are certified now and rated now, I should say, by EPA, 0.2 grams per horsepower, base horsepower hour. Forgive me for the gobbledygoops technical speak, but that's the basic rating. CARB has optional standards that could become near zero, so one of them is half of that, another one is 3/4 better than that, and the other one's 90% better than that. None of it has been determined by the Air Resources Board and won't be until another 2 years. So we've worked with almost all of the zero and near zero emission manufacturers. There's a list of them. You can see them all. I won't go through the names. There's really only one near zero engine right now that is being out there that we're testing. It's the Cummins Westport LNG engine. We anticipate others coming. For yard equipment, same thing. There are the list of the ones that we've worked with. We anticipate Calmar and Autocar and Capacity are working on them. And in particular, at our Pasha Green Omni terminal, Calmar is developing a zero emissions yard tractor that's actually using TransPower electric motor. And you may have heard of TransPower. They're a local developer, a small developer of zero emissions equipment. They've now partnered with Calmar. And so this is the kind of evolution that we like to see in zero emission technology development. We've also reached out to some of the new ones. I've got a list of them there. Frankly, that list changes almost weekly, so it's possible that it may not even be right. We just made it this week, but it'll change by next week. So this is the zero emission on-road trucks. Most of them are certainly commercially available. There's only a couple that are not truly commercially available. Toyota won't sell you one right now. If you ask, they won't do it. I think there's Volvo won't sell you one right now if you ask, but just about everybody else will. The cost of this on-road equipment, as you can see, $300,000 to $600,000 per unit compared to a diesel truck of $125,000. The post-purchase support is still not comparable. It's still they're really prototypes. The delivery times, these are hand-built units that take from 6 months to a year to build, and with only a 100-mile range, they're still not something that can be used by the vast majority of the trucking community. With the yard tractors, we're also working on them. Again, all of those are commercially available. You see the prices are from double to almost 4 times the price of a diesel yard truck. Similar problems with post-purchase support, similar problem with production capabilities, and range and power questions still remain. So
Cost continues to be a factor, obviously.
it does,
You're
because of
looking at
that price.
production.
Yes, and the fact that they're hand-built. So these are all issues that we're working on. We are certainly committed to working to reduce these prices and to gain economies of scale by being market makers and developing this type of equipment. But right now, it's not there. The near zero trucks, these are the LNG ones right now, are the only ones. There is a 0.1 gram, which is half of the rated standard now that's available, and there are prototypes that are being tested. We're also testing an on-road diesel near zero engine with the AQMD. So all of this is to say, you'll hear a lot of this, and it's fine. Everybody wants to go as fast as possible, but we wanted to be clear to you all as well as to our board and to the community that, we have to be clear about what it is when we're talking about availability and commercially available, we need to be precise in our comments and our statements about what that really means. So I'm going to switch now and do a very quick...
Before you go there, Chris, if I may.
Yeah, Gene.
We've got the lines of milestones set far out, but not too far out, and that was with our mayor's declaration of zero emissions terminal operating equipment by the year 2030 at the Port of LA, as well as Long Beach, and 2035 being the line of demarcation for heavy-duty trucks being zero emissions. You've heard Chris describe definitioning seems to be a little bit of a polarizing discussion among many groups. We need to get to standards, and that's going to be very important, not just opinions. And part of what we do in our industry is standardizing protocols, and whether it be with Underwriter Laboratories, ANSI, or others, this is an area we need to pursue. What are we doing about it? Part of our charter has been, as we move through with Mayor Garcetti's Sustainable Freight Advisory Committee here in Los Angeles and Long Beach, as well as the new San Pedro Bay Sustainable Freight Advisory Committee, it's one thing to say you have goals, but we also need tactical implementation along the way. And just to wait for technology that is not available, we would fall short of any of our obligations. So we have taken on 3 approaches. One is to campaign for funding. Because even if we did what we wanted to do as the Port of Los Angeles, and every dollar in revenue that we earned as a proprietary department in the city, it would take us at least 32 years to fund what we are calling the next iteration of the Clean Air Action Plan. 32 years. Secondly, with that, we have partnered with the ILWU and others to work in Sacramento to achieve some clarity around cap and trade funds. And as we saw coming out of state legislature over the weekend and into early this week, I think we've got a very good line of sight for the state's ports to be able to attract that funding based on merit. That'll be a part of it. Next is the market maker concept that Chris just alluded to. Part of what we have tried to do is it's wonderful to talk with people who are building new technology in their garages, but for a complex and an enterprise this large and this impactful to the country, we need well-capitalized companies to come along with us. So we have put together the concept of market maker, and that is showing these well-capitalized institutions that you will have a customer here at the Port of LA and Long Beach and the other ports in California, and our aspiration is the entirety of the west coast of the United States. Giving these folks confidence that if they build these machines and these trucks, they will have customers that will buy them. Early days and aspirational, but I think we've got some traction here. And by doing so, we have used our long-term industry relationships with major truck manufacturers and equipment suppliers at the original manufacturing level, along with their tiered supplier groups, to welcome them here for roundtable discussions, meetings with all stakeholder groups, from regulators to mainstream environmentalists, environmental justice groups, as well as our industry partners. And that's how we're going to get after this. We'll talk in just a second about what we've accomplished recently, but simply drawing a line out there in the distance that says we're going to hit this milestone at some point, we have got to have a very, very strategic scheme going forward to make sure that we engage the right parties, bring them to the table, and have a plan to operationalize how we further reduce emissions.
Thanks for that. Go ahead, Paul.
If I can just add to that, because I think it's an important point. It's not, we also have to be clear on what the line out there in the future is.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, to your point, zero emission doesn't have any independent meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And what the policy objective is has to be pretty clearly defined. And in the case of the port, you know, in most of the city's operations, greenhouse gas emissions is probably the most important thing. But for Mr. Buscaino's constituents, maybe in the port, NOx is more important. Maybe particulate matter,
Right.
you know, is a higher priority than greenhouse gas emissions. We have to be concerned about all of those things, but they aren't all encompassed in one neat little definition that currently exists. So, and then the other, I think, really critical point that you made, Mr. Cannon, when you were going through the other options of technology is where the current electrical grid is. Because it's all fine to say, well, battery-operated electric vehicles are clean vehicles. Well, no, they're not if they're pulling electricity off of a grid that is generating its electricity from coal. And, you know, people kind of lose sight of that. Mm-hmm. We're at about 28, 30% renewable, I think, on our grid, something like that with CWP. We're still, until the early 2020s, we're still burning coal. You have to kind of take that into account as well and realize that there's trade-offs in everything we do. And so my final point on that would be, and I know you're going to get into this in a minute, when it comes to the port's commitment to reducing emissions and to a cleaner fleet, one thing and in making the market, one thing that I hope will be a significant part, I know it is, and I hope it will continue to be an increasingly significant part of the port's vision for the future, is the opportunity to generate solar electricity on site in the port, and to utilize that as a transportation fuel as well for the port's fleet. Because there we really have an opportunity, I think, to generate a lot of power that will offset some of the concerns that I just expressed about using DWP's grid, which currently maybe doesn't have as high a renewable percentage as we would like to get to.
Right, and on that, Mr. Councilman, we are studying right now with a practical demonstration project at our Pasha Green Omni Terminal photovoltaic capabilities with internal storage and distribution. And this is a terminal that's built around resiliency in the effect of a natural disaster or hopefully ongoing operations. So there'll be more to report to you all back on that in the future. And the other piece around zero emissions, before we can get the traditional standards that we know nationally and internationally, is the statement of resiliency. We witnessed just a couple of weeks ago right here in Los Angeles that we found it difficult to keep the lights on with extreme heat in the valley and other locations. We were on continuous alert at the port because of our relationship with DWP as to how we operate our shoreside cranes, all 91, in the effort to help move the energy around our city and its areas during this extreme heat episode. So we've got to be really smart, too, going forward in our partnership within the city, among with other stakeholders, of how we can run that current properly and have the strong resiliency.
If I may, I was really struck by something our new commissioner said a moment ago when you asked about zero emissions, and she, I think, said it really great. She said that it's important to have these goals, and it's important to set these standards in these targets, because that's where we need to go. But we also have to recognize that in between here and there are steps. And those steps need to be based on the availability of equipment, the feasibility of equipment to actually work. And the zero emissions equipment is being tested, and that was one of the things that we wanted to say today, is that it's being tested. It's coming along, it's commercially available, but it's maybe not quite viable yet. And so until we get to that, there are people who are at our terminals who need to be buying equipment today and need to, we hope, continue to reduce emissions. And so we need to work with them to take those interim steps and also get to the end step, which we all know is needed, and that's to reduce reliance on combustion-based engines and moving towards zero emissions.
Yep.
Hit the emissions.
So quickly, I didn't bring a bunch of slides because I know that we're busy here at City Council, but we do our emissions inventory. Our 2016 emissions inventory came out, and we're pretty excited about it. And the reason is this. We had dramatic reductions in emissions, 57% in diesel and nitrogen oxide, 87% in diesel particulate matter, 98% in sulfur oxide, 15% reduction in greenhouse gas, all while having an 18% increase in cargo volumes since 2005. And to put that in perspective, I sort of played around with some numbers for you. We had almost an 8% increase in cargo volume, I believe, since last year. I think that's correct. And but we had, if you look at it, the best way to look at this stuff is ask yourself, how much emissions did you spend, or how much activity did you spend to move each box? And if you're getting better, if you're getting more efficient at moving each box, you would have less activity associated with that, and therefore less emissions. So each year we try to track emissions per box, emissions per TEU. If you look at those numbers from last year to this year, it's dramatic.
And the skeptics will say, Chris, that you've seen reduction in productivity. Of course, you're going to see reduction in emissions,
but you can't have. But with the volume of cargo going way up, thanks to the effort of Gene and the rest of our team, we had a 40% improvement in efficiency in diesel particulate matter with ships. 40%. That's over 1 year. That's just less activity means larger ships. We had 25% improvement in efficiency in NOx. We had a 33% improvement in efficiency in SOx, 30% in CO2 equivalent, that's fuel, 50% overall improvement in efficiency in CO2 equivalent year on year. How do you do that and have record volumes of cargo coming through the port, the largest in the history of the Western Hemisphere? How do you do that? Well, Gene talked about it, and he'll talk about it again. It's efficiency. You just have to get better at what you're doing. You have to have less activity associated with each box. It's better planning. It's better organization. It's a better way of doing things. And if you do that, that's how you get your emissions down the way we did. And it's dramatic. It's really dramatic what happened over 1 year, and it's all related to that efficiency. And Gene, I know you wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't want to take any more time than the council has today, but the efficiency model that we employed last year was nothing more than sheer grit and determination by rolling up our sleeves. The less touches to a box mean less emissions go airborne. Now with the GE system and some of the other things that we're doing, in addition to technology advancements, these numbers that Chris has mentioned, I've been in this industry 29 years. I've worked overseas for nearly a third of that career. I've never seen anything like this. Not only does our reputation precede us as a city, as ports, and that forward-leaning, outsized responsibility that we display every day, but this is really happening on the ground. And that, in a combination with what every other stakeholder has been sharing with us, means that we really can take this farther.
So quickly, these are our targets. This is our target for 2014. We're way ahead of all of them. And here's our targets for 2023, excuse me. We're almost there with NOx, and we are for diesel particulate matter and sulfur oxides. So our goal is to continue to be efficient while moving cargo and more cargo, and continue to improve those numbers. Well, these are really kind of summarize what we talked about. Greater efficiency is the biggest reason. Larger ships, improved cargo handling, coordination, and movement. We got cleaner equipment. We got more participation in vessel speed reduction, cleaner fuels, and increased use of shore power. Looking ahead, our CAP is going to have an increased focus on NOx and greenhouse gas. You'll hear more about that soon. So that'll, we hope, continue to reduce those areas. We're going to continue to develop clean technologies, the near zero and the zero emission equipment that I talked about. We're going to be market makers. We're going to push the development of both. Continued focus on supply chain efficiency. This is the efficiency that was just talked about. AMP, vessel speed reduction, and ship incentive programs are important. And then just sort of the obvious thing, the more you replace the old equipment, the cleaner your emissions get. It's just kind of an obvious thing. So we had a lot of that happen this time, and we hope to continue that. With that, I'll end my presentation.
Thanks,
Council members, and any comments, I'll take them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the update. And in preparation for the CAP, understand, Gene, November 1, both ports, 2nd. November 2nd, both ports will come together.
Yes.
Long Beach and LA, joint commission hearing on agreeing to the CAP.
Yeah, this will be the CAP policy vote by both harbor commissions, 08:30 Thursday morning, November 2nd, at the Los Angeles Harbor Department.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your presentation. We have one speaker card. Thomas Jelinek, please come forward.
Good afternoon again, Councilman. So used to being in front of Harbor Commissions.
Right.
Thomas Jelinich with PMSA.
San Pedro High School class of 92, Paul. Right here. My colleague, my schoolmate here. So proud to be a pirate. Hold his time. I'm sorry.
In fact, start his time.
Start his
over.
time. Let's start
He gets
again.
to start
One more
from the
time.
top.
Thanks, John.
So
Sorry I
92
cut you.
pirate.
There you go. That's
I'd
right.
really like to thank Gene and Chris for the comments they made. I think they gave a real good overview of the technology issues we're facing here. When you drill down deeper into the emissions numbers and look at trucks and cargo handling equipment, the emissions are even lower, 96% reduction overall. So we've made great strides. But the challenge on this technology that we're looking for in the updated CAP is tremendous. The ports have been trying to demonstrate new technology, electrified yard hostlers, for a decade now. Not a single demonstration has been successful. That doesn't mean we haven't moved the science forward, but it is hard. And we're now sort of leapfrogging to do even more difficult equipment like top handlers. That equipment will be extremely challenging to do, and we now have a date certain in the cap by which we propose to get to zero emissions, 2030. We don't know how we're going to do it with the technology that's currently available. And one of the troubling things in the cap is it says that as time runs out, terminal operators will be forced to make the upgrades to their equipment and technology with less time available. That's a larger financial burden for them, which it will be a challenge for the competitiveness of these ports. Something to keep in mind. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Thomas. So with that, this is a note and file item, so no action is necessary on item number 2. Any general public comment cards?
None.
Okay, so hearing none, then we'll adjourn this meeting. We're now adjourned. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for your patience.